The date is being given by the Illuminati to trap the New Age people, to trap them into believing they have to prepare for this date so they're caught totally unawares by what's going to happen in the next 2 months. There's a little comet called Elenin. Every time this little comet is in alignment with our planet and either the sun or some other body, there's a major earthquake. Now, vibrational harmonics work such that if they directly line up, you get an amplification of energy. February 27th, 2010, this little comet was in a direct alignment between the Earth and the sun. On that date, there was an earthquake in Chile. That's just a coincidence, isn't it? Well, there was another coincidence, because when the Earth came around the other side here, and the Earth was in alignment, and then the comet was a little bit closer, but they're in alignment again, and that was September 4th, 2010. There was an earthquake in Christchurch. And then the Earth came back round again, and then the next time it was in alignment with the sun, and now this is closer, March 11th, there's an earthquake in Japan. Once is a coincidence, twice is pushing it, 3 times, wait a minute, something's going on here. The other one that will happen is August 17th. I've gone publicly on this one because there is an alignment between the Earth, Venus, the Sun and Mercury. They're in a straight line, and Nibiru is at right angles to the Sun. At August the 17th, I'm being told there's going to be a massive earthquake on the planet. It will probably be somewhere between Alaska and San Francisco. The next alignment happens on September 26th this year, and it is between us and the sun. And at that point, it is 0.38 away from us. When it was 2 away, we had a magnitude 9 earthquake. The gravitational forces, the infrared forces, they're all 25 times greater on that date. The whole Pacific Rim will go with magnitude 12 to 15 earthquakes. New Zealand will disappear, Japan will disappear, Indonesia will disappear, China will disappear, Korea will disappear, Russia will disappear, the west coast of America will disappear, the whole lot. East coast of Australia will not be affected by the earthquakes per se, but they will be affected by the tidal waves that come from it. There is going to be a cosmic sonic shockwave that will totally blow out our Van Allen belts and our magnetic fields, and will leave the planet totally open to gamma radiation. If you are out in the open at that point, you will literally be fried alive. It's like the vampire jumping out into the light. That's what's going to happen. When this object goes across the sky, it's going to cause an eclipse that will last at least 3 days. So you're going to have all these volcanoes going off, pyroclastic blasts going everywhere, level 12, 13 magnitude earthquakes. The electromagnetic pulses are going to fry all electrics. You're going to have wind speeds over 1,000 miles an hour. You're going to have surface temperatures of 60 degrees plus. All the water surfaces are going to dry up. The volcanic ash is going to cause huge amounts of acid rain. There will be wildfires all over the planet. And they're saying nothing about this? I do get channeled information through, but if I can't confirm it with scientific stuff, I'm not going to put it out there. If people ask me, I'll say, well, look, that's what I'm told, but it's up to you whether you believe it or not. Everything that we tell you tonight, do not believe a single word that I tell you. Because if you believe what people tell you, you're a fool. But don't disbelieve what I tell you. Because if you do disbelieve, you're a cynic. Not a skeptic, a cynic. So have an open mind on the information. Some of the information will be scientific data, and it just stands on its own for what it is. Some of it is historical information that comes from the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Sumerians, who were documenting what was happening in their life. And some of it is information that's come through to me. It's like the glue that puts it all together. But you don't have to believe it. Some of the stuff that I'll tell you, you'll be aware of. Some of it you won't be aware of. Some of it will be a totally different perspective. And you are not obliged to take it on board. Some of what we tell you will absolutely scare the shit out of you, the implications of it. And if there is anyone here who walks out of the room without having experienced some point tonight where they don't go, oh shit, I would be very surprised. Because you have to go through it to understand it. But what I want you to trust more than anything else is what resonates within you. When you hear something, if it suddenly get that thing up the spine thing, that instantaneous reaction is your truth. You may then click into a whole lot of blocking and fear patterns after that, and that's okay too, and that's where Crystal will weave her magic to help you work through that stuff. Okay? So let's get a little bit into this. What are we talking about? I'm going to go through a little bit of metaphysics and a little bit of astrophysics. I'm not going to try to go too deep into it. The objective of this is not for me to give you everything on a platter. It's to give you the points where you can go and research it for yourself. I'm going to give you the core, and then you can go and look up the links that I've given you and formulate your own opinions on stuff. So a little bit of metaphysics first. How many of you are aware of Drunvalo Melchizedek? Okay, about half. Amazing man, he's very, very aware, and he has a book called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, and I've listed it there. It's a book that every person should have in their library, whether they believe or don't believe. Whether you're spiritual or non-spiritual, religious, non-religious, scientific, non-scientific, because he covers everything. And in particular, what he covers is how the universe came into being. Now, this whole universe that we live in is just a thought construct. It's not a reality, it's a perceived reality. And it's just a thought. Just like you have a thought and it's real to you, Source decided, you know what? This is me. I'm a sphere of what I know. Everything that I know is contained in this sphere. But I haven't experienced everything that I know. So do I really know it? It's like so many people go, oh yeah, I know that. They haven't experienced it, but they're intellectualizing that they know it. But it's only once you've truly experienced something. Like no man knows what childbirth's like. They can say, oh yeah, I know it. I know it because I've seen my wife give birth. You know, I've seen all those sorts of things. So I know what childbirth's about. Can you imagine a man saying to a woman, yeah, I know what childbirth's like? What's a woman going to look at him and go, get real? You have to experience it to know what it's like. And that's what we're talking about here. So Source said, I'm going to project myself to the edge of myself and duplicate what I do. Now I've created his source, and we all know the source of everything is just love. It's a state of being. It's not something that you can give to someone. It's not something that you can get back. So when anyone says, I'm giving you love, or I love you, or I get love from this person, you don't. Love is a state of being. That's all it is. And it's a wondrous state, and it's not dependent on anyone else. So Source says, let's shift over here to be everything that I'm not. So we're going to have the absence of love. And then it oscillates backwards and forwards between these two things, creating contrast, creating conflict. And in moving here, which is a straight line, it creates this shape, which is like a UFO, which scientists have realised is what light is shaped like. And it's called a vesica piscicus. Piscus, I think. Can't spell it properly. And they've worked out that light has this shape. And it sort of fluidly goes backwards and forwards. Because when God said, "Let there be light," that was the first movement, this directional thing to here, which creates a there and a here. It creates the duality. That's where the duality came from being here to there. It also, in going from here to there, takes time. So the first dimension is the singularity, which we've all heard about, the void, the singularity. The second dimension is time. And in going from here to there and backwards and forwards, it creates an oscillation, which is vibration. And that's why everything in this entire universe is just a vibration. Everything. The frequency will shift. That's why we've got light and sound and subatomic physics. They have different frequencies, but all they are is vibration. So here we've got the first part of everything. Here's the next stuff. Oh, the absence of love generates fear. Fear is absolutely essential for Source to be able to have a mirror of itself. It cannot experience itself without the mirror of itself, which is fear. That's why fears are so important. That's why we should not suppress them. That's why we should not bury them. We should embrace them, because they are there to reflect our consciousness. If you don't have eyes, you can't see light reflecting off the walls, so you have no feedback. If you have no ears, you can't hear. Therefore, you have no feedback on your consciousness. You put somebody in one of those sensory deprivation tanks, deprive them of light, sound, and all of those things, and they go into a totally altered state of consciousness because they have no reflection back to where they are. So that the perception that we have now is because of these fears that we have. That's one of the things that gives us our consciousness. So the next thing that happens is Source, that was great. Source did that for any amount of time and then went, okay, I've explored all the options in that. I've gone slowly from here to there. I've gone fast. I've created all the different vibrational energies. What do I do next? Go along the edge here to the point where they connect. Now we've got rotational energy, which is why absolutely everything in this universe rotates around something. There is no such thing as stillness in this universe. It does not exist. So everybody who's trying to still their mind or do all of this, you're going against the universe. It ain't going to happen. You're not meant to have a still mind. You're meant to have a flowing mind. And so many of the light workers, and please don't be offended by anything I say. And if you do get offended, maybe it's triggering a truth. Because only the truths cause us to react a certain way. If you try to bring anything into balance, you are trying to stagnate energy. You are trying to pull it so it does not move. Balance is stagnation. There is no such thing as balance in the universe. The key word is flow and harmony. You do not want your life in balance, because you're spending all of this energy trying to pull it into stagnation, and the whole power of the universe is going to go and knock you off balance all the time. So you just fight harder and harder and harder to bring your life into balance. Doesn't happen. Can't do it. Source won't have it. But you bring it into flow. Now that's different. And here's an image for you. I'm in the middle of a river. I'm swimming against the current so I can stay exactly where I'm meant to be. I'm trying to stay balanced. I'm using all of my energy and I'm getting nowhere. But the minute I stop doing that, I go with the flow. And that's where the fear kicks in, because where am I going? I don't know where I'm going. Well, you're going somewhere new and exciting. That's what Source wants. That's why Source moved. Because it wants new stuff to happen. And it creates rotational energy. And in doing that, it creates the third dimension. So that's a little bit of metaphysics to go into stuff. So the key aspect here is this rotational energy aspect, because the next thing we're going to go into is a little bit of astrophysics. All of the physical aspects of the universe fall down to simple mathematical things. Is everybody familiar with the Fibonacci spiral? Okay, for those of you who aren't, it's pretty simple. You take the number 1 and you add it to another 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, 5 plus 8 is 13, 21, 34, and on and on and on and on and on ad infinitum. You'll see it everywhere in nature. Trees create branches based on this, and flower petals based on this. And the great thing is, if you take these two numbers and you divide, you get 2 by 1 is 2. 2 and 3 in divide is 1.5. The halfway measure in here keeps getting closer and closer and closer to 1.618, which is what they call the golden mean, or pi. Absolutely everything in the universe is based on this. The length of this part of my finger to that is 1 to 1.6. The length of this part of my finger to that finger is 1 to 1.6. The length of this to this is 1 to 1.6. This to this, 1 to 1.6. It's everywhere. It's a universal rule. Back with that other figure that we had here, this figure keeps going around and it does the same things over and over again. Creates another thing around here. And eventually, it forms a symbol that is known as the flower of life. In this, all of these are feminine. Everything that is a curve is feminine energy, okay? But if I take the centre and I connect it to another one here, I get a straight line. And if I take the centre here and connect it to another one, I get a straight line. When you do all of the straight lines and connect up here, they're all masculine energies. You create every single subatomic crystalline structure that everything is built on. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Every part of your body is in here. And there's a thing called Metronon's cube, and that's, I'm flying through this stuff because you can grab the book if you're more interested in it. But it gives you some background into what we're going on. Here's an interesting thing. This image has been found various places around the world. In particular, there's a temple in Egypt in Abydos, and this temple is over 100,000 years old, and it sits behind the temple of Seti. And the Egyptologists tell you that they dug this temple 50 feet into the ground and then put these massive red granite blocks in there. Yeah, that really makes sense, that you would dig it underground and then put the blocks in. What does make sense is it was built and then at some time some massive tsunami came over and covered it up to the hilt. And then they built another temple on the ground beside it because they knew it was there. But this temple's been excavated, and if you get the chance to go to Egypt, you have to go there. It's extraordinary. There's no hieroglyphics on any of the major big red granite blocks in temples. None. And there's a reason for that. I'm not going to go into it, but if you're interested in Egypt, I can go into it. But what is interesting is this symbol is on these blocks. It's not painted on. It's not drawn on. It's not carved on. It is laser etched into the stone. Laser etched into the stone. And it's over 100,000 years old. We do not have lasers today that can do that. But there it is. It's there, and it's the only symbol, this flower of life, which contains all of the structure of everything. So let's go to the formation of our solar system, because we've got to sort of find out what 2012 and all this stuff's about. The background information will become more relevant as we go through stuff. So I just need to get it all the way. That's the hard stuff. That's the brain teasing stuff. From here on, it's easy. When our solar system was forming, all of the cosmic dust and everything starts spinning because everything's rotational energy. So it all starts rotating. And have you ever wondered why scientists can't explain gravity? They can tell you what it does and the effects of it, but they can't explain it. Because everything in this universe comes from source, right? Can we accept that as a given? Everything comes from source? Everything comes from source down. Highest vibration, lowest density. Okay? Highest vibration, lowest density. Down to lowest vibration, highest density. Now, density is just how many molecules you can cram into a little bit of space. Now, the interesting thing about that is, because everything is just this continuum of vibration, look around. All you're seeing is slowed down light. Every person you look at is just slowed down light. Slowed down through all sorts of different frequencies, slowed down through sound. Sound is slowed down light. Matter, is just slowed down sound into a higher density. So when the sun was first forming, it wasn't gravity pulling everything together, it was actually things being compressed from outside. It was consciousness compressing down and slowing down vibration. That's why scientists can't explain gravity, because they think it's a pulling thing and it's not. It's a compression thing. So here we've got all of our little dust, cosmic bits and pieces and hydrogen atoms and all those things, all being compressed down so it can form a level of consciousness. Because there's like tram stops along the way here. And we can give them names. We can call it 11th density, or 9th dimension, or 7th dimension, or 5th dimension, until we get down to 3rd dimension. It's just a label. And I'll give you an example. If I play a G string on a guitar and my ears can only hear G, nothing else, and then I tune that guitar string up to a G sharp, when I play it, I can't hear it. It doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. That sound doesn't exist because I can't hear it. That's why people say, I don't believe in fifth dimensional beings, because I've never seen one. Because you can only see with your eyes in a light spectrum that's this big. Can anyone here see infrared? Can anyone here see ultraviolet? But we know they exist, but we can't see them because our measuring device doesn't have it. So here's all of these atoms compressing down to form our sun, and they're spinning. Whenever you have a fluid that is spinning, it moves around. And remember, no balance in the universe. Don't want balance. So it's out of balance. So as it's spinning, it's out of balance and it wants to try and balance it the same way as that Fibonacci spiral is getting closer and closer and closer to 1.618 but never gets there. It's trying to balance itself. So this little bit that's on the side here starts to move apart and eventually gets thrown off. And this part comes more into balance and eventually ignites and forms our sun. But as it's spinning, it forms a galactic plane of dust. I'm going to sort of draw this as best I can. Like a CD that sort of radiates out. Has anyone seen what happens when you vibrate something with sand on top of it, like a disc, how it forms rings? Have you ever looked at the rings of Saturn? What they are is they're harmonic nodes. Whatever the frequency is of the thing here, it creates nodes. And those node points are where things will start to form. So there is a real mathematics, and you can look this up as well, as to where planets will form around an object. So our solar system, while it's forming our sun, is also forming planets through rotational energy and vibration. And here's one of the interesting points. Here's the Earth. The Earth does not sit in one of those harmonic points. The Earth was not an original planet of this solar system. And we'll go into a little bit of the metaphysics later in terms of the tetrahedron. Does everyone know the tetrahedral structures and vibrations? It's one of the very first levels of vibrational consciousness, and the Earth has that structure. But Jupiter and Saturn have much more complex sacred geometries about them. If you look at Saturn from the top, the clouds form a hexagon shape. It has a different vibrational energy because it's one of the original planets in this solar system. So just remember that for the moment, that here's the Earth sitting somewhere that isn't a natural harmonic within the thing. So it wasn't part of our original plan. So we've got to think, well, where did it come from then? Which we'll get to. So we'll add another ring out here. So we've got Mars, and then we've got Jupiter, but in between we've got the asteroid belt, okay? In the meantime, this little bit of cosmic plasma that was thrown off from the sun goes off here, and it does the same thing. It starts to form its own little circle, and it forms its own little planets around it. But this one doesn't have enough mass to ignite the way the sun does. So what it forms is something that's called a brown dwarf. A brown dwarf star. And here's something that I don't know if anyone saw this the other day, but there was an article on the internet where scientists are starting to think now that maybe our solar system might have a dwarf star. Because every single solar system they have ever discovered is at least a binary system. Some have 3 stars. Every single solar system is at least a binary star. So now they're coming out saying, well, there's a possibility that we may have a brown dwarf star. Because this is the way the Illuminati work. They give you the information in through the back door so you don't really know what's going on. Most of us have been aware of Nibiru, whatever you want to call it, the destroyer, Planet X, for ages. How did it come about? Up until the beginning of the last century, I think it was 1927, we could see Saturn. That was as far as we could see Saturn. And when they started analysing Saturn's orbit, they realised there was something of bigger mass outside of Saturn that was pulling it out of its regular orbit. So they punched the figures into a computer when the computers came around, or they calculated, whatever they did, and they found Neptune. They went, yay, that's it, we found it. And then when they analysed Neptune's orbit, they went, oh, hang on a minute, something else is pulling Neptune around. So they did their calculations again, and lo and behold, they discovered, hang on. They found Uranus first, and then they found Neptune. So they thought, that's it, we've solved the problem. And then they analysed Neptune's orbit and went, no, hang on a minute, there must be something bigger outside of that because it's being pulled out of orbit by something else. And then they found Pluto. Well, Pluto's a P. That's not doing it. So they then said, there must be something bigger outside of Pluto that is pulling it, and it's got to be huge, it's got to be massive. And in 1983, NASA announced that there was a brown dwarf star outside of our solar system, which belongs to this star. It's not from somewhere else. It has an orbit around our sun, because everything revolves around it, and because this came from our sun, it has an orbit around our sun. Are they telling us this? No. Why not? Why wouldn't they tell us this? So now we know that these things happen. So if we look at all of the planets are on what we call a planetary equator thing. So everyone thinks this is what happens. Here's the sun, and then you go out in a line and you've got Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter. Is that what everyone thinks? That they're all in this nice little flat plane? Because guess what? These planets are actually all pulled, their orbits all sort of go off that way from the galactic, because they've all been pulled by this brown dwarf out of this normal orbit where they started. So this thing's going through backwards and forwards, and it's got a number of planets the size of Jupiter around it. And at some time in the past, because it cuts through here, one of the planets from here collided with a planet that used to be where the asteroid belt was. And the bulk of it kept going off around this sun and reformed. But part of it went crashing off into what is now Earth's orbit, this rotating bit of molten rock, and the leftovers stayed in where the asteroid belt is. That seems pretty simple, doesn't it? Scientists telling you that? No. Why are they not telling you that? Because they don't want you to know that we could have a collision, because that would scare us. So we won't tell you that. In the meantime, the bit that was the Earth does exactly the same thing. It's out of balance, it's a rotating fluid because it's molten rock, and in trying to balance itself, it creates a little bulge and it throws it off. That's where the moon came from. The moon used to be part of the Earth, of this molten bit. How do we know that? What proof do we have of that? Well, when they examined the moon rocks, they were exactly the same as the Earth. That's a pretty good start. The other thing is, the moon is pulling away from the Earth 3 centimetres a year. So if it's pulling away 3 centimetres a year, you only have to go back and back and back, and there was a time when the two of them were together. It's pretty simple, and it was about 4 to 5 billion years ago, if you do the simple maths. But there's one more piece of evidence. When you have two objects that rotate around one another, they have what's called a centre of gravity. Okay? It's the central point at which they rotate around. The centre of gravity of these two objects is about 3,000 kilometres inside the crust of the Earth. The only way that could happen would be if the two objects were once one. So why is that relevant? Why am I telling you that? Is that part of what's going on here? Yeah, it is. Because what was left on the Earth was a scar, the land bridge, the bump where it used to connect. Has anyone heard of Pangaea? Pangaea was the original one continent. Because remember they say how it was one continent and it all broke up? They ever tell you how it broke up or why it broke up? Or how it formed in the first place? No. Why not? Because if you start getting the answers to those questions, you'll go deeper. Well, I'm going to tell you, because you have a right to know. We've got this one landmass here, and the moon is out here, but for now I'm going to put it over here. Where does the water go on the planet? Where does our water go? Lots of places? The water, that's a really interesting question. The water goes lots of places. It actually doesn't. What determines where the water goes? The moon. The gravity of the moon pulls all the water to here and it balances on the other side. It's pulled to the moon, so the water stays exactly where it is. So what causes the tides? No. What causes tides on planet Earth? Because the water stays exactly pulled to the moon. The rotation of the Earth causes the tides. Okay? Because the Earth rotates underneath it. The water doesn't move, the Earth's moving. Originally they used to do it together. But over time, because the moon was pulling away, it started to lag behind. The further it got away, the more it lagged behind. So we think the moon is rotating around the Earth, when in actual fact the moon is lagging behind the Earth's rotation, but all the water is staying exactly where it is with the moon. Important for you to know that for what's going to happen down the track. Okay? If you have a question at any time, please fire it at me. So we've got this one continent. So here's the Earth going through space, and it's got now the moon's pulled away from it. What causes the Earth to try to balance itself now? What's going to have enough gravitational force to pull this crust apart enough so that the Earth can balance? Because the crust of our planet, you know when we see a steel mill and they're milling the steel and you get this stuff on top of it called slag, which is sort of a crust that forms on the molten metal. That molten metal is caused by the light impurities hitting the cooler air. And that slag is exactly what the crust of our planet is. Because what's the core of our planet? Molten metal. So the outside of it is just a crusty slag. But originally it was just one mass. So what caused it to break up? Anyone have any thoughts? The brown dwarf star. Because what's the brown dwarf star got? Massive gravity. Okay. Now the brown dwarf star could be anything from 1/3 the size of the sun to 1/2 the size of the sun. Okay. In comparison, if this is our sun, a brown dwarf's probably about that big and the Earth's about that big. So it's big. And it has massive gravitational pull. It also throws out huge amounts of infrared heat. Now you can't see it with a visible eye because it doesn't throw off visible light because it didn't have enough mass to ignite. But it throws off huge amounts of infrared heat. Starting to think what the real cause of global warming might be? Because guess what? About 2.5, 3 years ago, scientists made an extraordinary discovery. Neptune, which used to rotate like this, had been pulled over on its side and was now rotating that way. They didn't know why. What would cause a planet to be pulled over on its side? Maybe a little brown dwarf? Perhaps, that was coming close to it. Beginning of 2009, we come in a little bit closer, we get to Saturn. And Saturn suddenly has 12 months of extraordinary electronic storms that have never existed before. Every time you come in, they've found every single planet in our solar system is heating up, is having extraordinary storms going on them. There are storms raging on Jupiter at the moment. Mars is heating up. The Earth's heating up. Now, I was in Los Angeles and I met a woman who was an expert in global warming. She'd written PhDs on it and everything. So I said to her, fantastic. You can answer some questions that have been really bothering me. She said, no problems. I said, our polar caps are melting, right? She said, yes. I said, because of what we're doing to the atmosphere? She said, yes. I said, right, so it's all the polar ice that's melting because the air's heating up? Yes. I said, let's go to the North Pole. Because the North Pole is a giant iceberg. 10% of it is above water and 90% of it's below. But it's the 10% above that's melting, right? That's what we're seeing because of what we're doing to the air. She said, yes. I said, see, I'm no expert, but what's the air temperature at the North Pole? 30 degrees below freezing. So how does the ice that's in below freezing melt because of the air? She went, well, I said, well, hang on, let's go to the South Pole, because the South Pole's a continent, okay? And they have a glacier there which is a mile thick, and there's more snow falling at the South Pole than ever before. And they are so concerned that that glacier will slip off the continent. Have you heard that concern? They're totally scared that that whole glacier is going to fall off.
There's two of them, I think.
Do you know why? Because of the water underneath the glacier acting like a lubricant. So it's not the top of the South Pole that's melting, because guess what the air temperature is at the South Pole? -70. It's 1 mile below, away from the atmosphere, where it's melting. It's melting in contact with the continent. So can you explain to me why that's melting? She couldn't. I said, can you explain to me why every single planet in our solar system is heating up at the moment? Because I'm sure we don't have human civilizations on that causing greenhouse gases. She said, where are you getting all this information from? I went, you're the expert. Surely you've done all the research, because I'm getting that from NASA, from independent scientists. She walked away. Didn't want to know. No, you're a fool. You're an idiot. I said, okay.
Did she know, or was she just denied?
Head in the sand. She prided herself on being an expert of something, and she had ignored the evidence that contradicted what she was saying. And we find this a lot with our academics. So there we've got some object that's causing all of these things to happen, global warming. So what evidence do we have that this has happened before? That this thing has come through, and it's... Because when it comes close here to the continent, it pulls the continent apart and it causes fractures, and Mother Earth wants to try and balance herself, so these things move. That's what causes continental drift. Ask a scientist what causes continental drift and they'll tell you, well, the tectonic plates are moving because of the lava. And I said, no, that's what's happening, but what's causing it? And they go, well, the plates move because they move. There has to be a reason for them to move. This is the reason. They break up because the planet is trying to balance itself. How often does this brown dwarf star come through? Do we have any record of the last time it was here? Well, we do. Because the ancient Egyptians wrote about a pole shift. Because guess what happens when this crust gets pulled loose from the core? When it's attached, we've got a North Pole and a South Pole. It's pretty simple. But when the crust gets pulled loose from the core, you have this very, very thin North Pole and a very, very massive North Pole under it, and a very thin South Pole and a very massive South Pole. Does anyone know what happens when you put two like magnets together? They push apart. The core of our planet is massive. So what's going to move, the crust or the core? The crust. And what happens is it literally pushes away and turns upside down. So the crust of our planet will turn totally upside down and reattach. Now, if you ask the scientists to explain a pole shift, they make it sound like that the north and south just change, that there's no big deal about it. But all the evidence, do you remember when they found the mammoths that used to live in temperate zones and they found them frozen solid with food still in their mouths? Because in the space of an hour they went from a temperate zone to subarctic temperatures, because this shift happens over a couple of hours. That's how fast it happens. Now here's the thing. If you are on the equator part here, if you're here and the shift happens, all hell breaks loose. Because apart from all the earthquakes and everything that go on, the water stays where it is and the planet rotates underneath. So you think there's a tidal wave coming to you when in fact you're moving under the water at 1,000 miles an hour. But if you're here at the pivot point, you do this over 3 hours. So if you're in a pivot point, you're not going to notice anything other than the sky's going to turn around. And when you read the ancient Egyptian texts, they tell about the sky turning around, the sun rising in the west and setting in the east. They describe a total pole shift. So do the ancient Sumerians. So do the ancient Mayans. So when was the last one? The last one was 1600 BC. That was when the last total pole shift happened. There have been 2 others since then. There was one in, when was it? There was one in 5200 BC. There was one in 8800 BC. So this is from scientific. They measure it because they measure it from the lava that's laid down. When fresh lava is laid down, as it solidifies with the magnetic field in it. That's how they can tell when these things happen. So the last one that the Egyptians and everyone talk about was 1600 BC. Now we start to ask, well, when's the next one due? Because this thing has an orbit of around about 3,600 years. So 1600 BC, 3,600 years, smack bang now. Smack bang now. So we know what happens with a pole shift. It pulls the crust apart, it has huge magnetic forces, it has all of this infrared heat going on. What's happening on the planet at the moment? Earthquakes, more than usual, bigger than usual. Volcanoes are going off that were dormant. We're seeing changes in the temperature because of the heat. Everything that are preliminary signs of a pole shift. So is there any evidence to support it? Actual physical evidence? There is. Now, you all know who NASA is. They're the guys who've lied to you about so many things over the years. The whole Apollo program was just a cover-up because NASA has been on the moon since 1959. You all aware of that? Been on the moon since 1959. John F. Kennedy found out about it, was going to tell the world, and they went, no, you're not going to tell anyone. Boom. Do you know who shot John F. Kennedy, by the way? Would you believe the driver of the car? The first bullet came through and hit him in the back, but the one that blew his head apart was the driver of the car, and you can see it in the footage. Not the footage they originally showed you, which cut the driver out of it. But the original footage that has the driver in it shows this trained secret security guy take his left hand off, put it under his hand like that, and at that moment, Kennedy's head gets blown off and he turns back. You can find that out for yourself. That's just Illuminati. That's the little byproduct for you to throw in there. So, do we have any proof? Well, in 1983, they discovered this brown dwarf. And then they discovered it because in 1983, they put up IRIS, the infrared satellite. 9 months after they put IRIS up, they announced that they had found this brown dwarf. And 2 days later, they denied it. No, we didn't find anything. They covered the whole thing up straight away. But the cat was out of the bag because they'd already made the announcement. In 1992, they put up, I think it was 2 more infrared satellites. From 2002 to 2009, they put up another 7 infrared satellites. They spent billions of dollars fixing the Hubble telescope because it was broken, and turned it into an infrared telescope. Suddenly, there's all this interest in infrared telescopes. They even built one at the South Pole. Why would you build one at the South Pole? Well, it just so happens, here's north and south, and I'm doing it upside down from where it was before, but the orbit of this thing is that way. So the best place to view it is from the South Pole. They say it's because the air is clear there. But they rushed to build this thing in 2004. They rushed to build it. So suddenly they've put all of these infrared satellites up. So what are they focusing on? What are they actually looking at? Interestingly enough, there's a little comet called Elenin. Now, according to NASA, this was discovered by a Russian amateur astronomer, and you can even find a page about him and information about him on the web. And he discovered this tiny little comet, which has an orbit, strangely enough, that comes in and around the Sun, and then there's the orbit of Mercury, Venus and Mars. I did a little bit of checking with some colleagues of mine in LA, one of whom who is very closely connected in. He's a past president of the Navy Reserve, very connected in through the CIA and the FBI. And I asked him about this Elenin, discovered by Leonid Elenin. I said, what's the story? He said, he doesn't exist. It's a cover name. He said, it's not a comet, and we'll go into why it's not a comet, but it's coming from the constellation of Leo. The whole project is under the overview of the National Institute of Defence, and Elenin is an acronym for Extinction Level Event Near Impact Nibiru. I said, whoa, smoking gun here. But I want more proof because they say it's a comet. Now, a comet is made of dust, dirt and ice. Okay? It doesn't have an infrared spectrum. Okay? And it doesn't have a huge gravitational field. It's just a chunk of dust and ice. So why have they got infrared satellites tracking it? Why are they using their most expensive infrared satellites tracking a dust and ice ball? That doesn't add up to me. That doesn't make sense. Also, do you remember when Comet Kohoutek came through and Comet Halley came through? And whenever there was a comet coming through, NASA are jumping up and down saying, you've got to see, it's going to look fantastic. It's going to be across the sky, and there was all of this hype about comets, 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 comets. Heard anything from NASA about Elenin? Because guess what? At its closest point to the Earth, it's only 21 million miles away. That's 1/5 the distance between us and the Sun. Most of the other comets that they've talked about have been out here somewhere. 400, 500 million miles away. And they were jumping up and down. And they're saying nothing about this? That doesn't add up to me. Doesn't add up. Something doesn't add up. But I'm still not thinking they're lying to us much.
They probably want to shoot something at it.
Maybe. So then I started looking, and there was a coincidence. Because I'll get my dates right, it was February 27th, and you may have this on your list. February 27th, 2010, this little comet was in a direct alignment between the Earth and the Sun. Direct alignment. Now, vibrational harmonics work such that if they directly line up, you get an amplification of energy. So gravitational waves are no difference to that. If they line up, the gravitational waves amplify. So on that date, there was an earthquake in Chile of, it was huge, 9 point something or other. That's just a coincidence, isn't it? That this little comet is in directly line with the Earth and the Sun, and there's a massive earthquake on it. That's just a coincidence. Well, there was another coincidence, because when the Earth came around the other side here, and the Earth was in alignment, and then the comet was a little bit closer, but they're in alignment again, and that was September 4th, 2010. There was an earthquake in Christchurch. That was just another coincidence, by the way. 2 coincidences. And then the Earth came back round again, and then the next time it was in alignment with the Sun, and now this is closer, March 11th, there's an earthquake in Japan. Once is a coincidence, twice is pushing it, 3 times, wait a minute, something's going on here. And on there you will see a list of every time this little comet is in alignment with our planet and either the Sun or some other body, there's a major earthquake. No way could that be a comet. All of those alignments, earthquake, 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 all the changes that are going on, here's a smoking gun. But do we have any other proof? Because I'm not trying to convince you here, I'm just saying I'm having questions about this. Are you all aware of Google Earth? That you can punch in any address and bang, you can see it. Are you also aware that there are certain areas, because NASA controls Google Earth. Did we say who NASA are, by the way? You know they're not a US department. They're a private company. And NASA came from Nazi Germany. All the guys that built all the rockets, they were all from Nazi Germany. Because NASA is owned by the Illuminati. Okay? So NASA have an agenda. Okay? So when we go to Google Earth, try and have a look at Area 51. Why not? Okay? Because it's blacked out, isn't it? It's censored. Okay? Because they don't want you to know what's going on there. So they censor it. They put a big black square on it. Yeah. Anywhere they don't want you to know what's there, they put your big black square.
Bob Lazar works there. Bob Lazar from America, he worked for NASA for a few years. And they tried to get rid of his, all his diplomas, degrees and everything. They tried to finish him off.
Yeah, tried to discredit him. So many people have had accidents.
Yeah, a lot of
yeah.
them.
So that's Google Earth. Are you aware of Google Sky? Google Sky is run by, guess who? NASA. And they plug into all of their satellites. So you can go into Google Sky and you can look at the whole sky as it is right now. So when I say this to you, go to Google Sky and have a look at the constellation of Leo. No, it's not blacked out. Okay? When you look at it, there's nothing untoward about it. Then go to the little right-hand corner and shift up in the infrared spectrum. And as you shift it to the infrared spectrum, suddenly appears an object that looks like that in the infrared spectrum. The winged destroyer the ancient Egyptians talk about. Here's a little brown dwarf in the constellation of Leo coming towards it.
They would show that, but they won't show Area 51. So they're kind of giving information right here, but not...
Because they think that most of us are absolutely stupid and wouldn't even bother looking. And they can fob it off, left, right and centre. The interesting thing is, though, if you go into the constellation of Virgo and have a look, there's a big black square in the constellation of Virgo. And you can see something coming out from behind it, which is a binary star system. Now, this might sound bizarre, but the reason they're blacking that out is because there are things coming from that star system. visitors.
Is there 2 star systems that are alive and running at the moment there?
But it's a binary system.
Yeah, but I've heard that there's 2 planets that they're actually living on.
Oh, no, we're talking about Nibiru.
Oh, okay.
Nibiru and the Anunnaki, which is a whole other thing.
Where's Orion's belt?
Orion's belt.
Yeah, Orion's belt.
It's in the... Can anyone remember the constellation it is? I can't remember it. It's in the constellation of Orion. I'll give you a little interesting fact about that. Those of you who have read the books of Baval and West, who say that Orion is the copy of the stars in the sky, that when you see the pyramids on the ground in Giza, okay, and you're spot on because they're a mirror image. They're not a copy of it. They're a mirror image. And the Egyptians don't work that way. So the only way that those could match up would be if the pyramids were built when the earth was up the other way. So the pyramids were built before the last pole shift. Okay? There's no one else that's got that yet. Okay? It's pretty simple. It's like, oh, right. Here's another thing. The Sphinx used to have a lion's head. And if you knew that something was going to happen on a particular date in your calendar, what would you do? You'd mark it. Ahead of schedule, you'd mark it. Well, they knew thousands of years ahead that something was going to come from the constellation of Leo at that time when it lines up there. So the Sphinx wasn't built at the time that it lines up. It was built way before it as a warning to say when this lines up in the constellation of Leo, that's when the shit's going to hit the fan. And that was the last pole shift.
Alex, good question.
Yep.
Can you actually see that it's blacked out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But why
Yeah.
don't they do it properly and completely remove it so you wouldn't even question if something was blacked out there?
Because we're stupid. And we're not even going to look at that.
There is
Okay.
exactly the address where you can go and punch it.
Yeah.
And who's going to believe anyone that...
Oh, exactly.
Anyone?
Exactly. And they'll just discredit you or whatever. Because they just don't want you. And if they discredit you enough and make it difficult enough, then you'll give up, won't you?
That's fine.
Also, Alex, why Egypt?
Egypt?
Why that particular part of the earth? Why it's not somewhere like, I don't know, in Asia?
Okay. There are pyramids off the coast of Japan. There are pyramids in China. They're all built around the 19.5 degree mark. And there's a reason for that. Okay, there's a reason for that. Because that diagram I showed you of the flower of life creates what they call geometric solids. Please tell me I've got a mental block on the sacred geometries. And when you create a tetrahedron, it looks like the Star of David, but imagine they're three-dimensional. And when they fit inside a sphere, the points where these touch are at 19.5 degrees in the latitude. So they're energy points.
Sorry, is there any correlation with like the Jewish symbol?
That's a whole other lecture. Okay, every single religion has been created by the Illuminati to ensnare people. Every single religion, including New Age, including the New Age religions. They control everything.
Behind all of that?
We'll get to that in the second half. It's a great question. And it's one that might shock you a little bit, but we'll work through it. So here's this body coming through. Look, we've got a brown dwarf coming through. The evidence is overwhelming. They're trying to hide it. They don't want you to know about it. What we want to know is, okay, we know the impacts are going to be pretty big, but how big and when? What's the time frame? If we track through Elenin, you will notice that on August 17th, I've gone publicly on this one, because there is an alignment between the Earth, Venus, the Sun and Mercury. They're in a straight line, and Nibiru is at right angles to the Sun. At August the 17th, I'm being told there's going to be a massive earthquake on the planet. It will probably be somewhere between Alaska and San Francisco, and I got told this last year that it was going to be Seattle. They told me there was going to be a major earthquake around Seattle in... You got a shiver? Thank you. So August 17 is another sign that something's going to happen. But let's go a little bit further through, because when the Japan earthquake happened, Nibiru sort of comes through like that. And there's a time now where Nibiru and our Earth are travelling at the same rate. So we're not seeing any major changes because it's still around about 1.5 AU away. AU is a measure of the distance between the Earth and the Sun. It's like the radius measurement. When the Japan earthquake happened, it was 2 AU away and we had a magnitude 9 earthquake. The next alignment happens on September 26th this year, and it is between us and the Sun. And at that point, it is 0.38 away from us. Now, gravitational fields, it's 0.38, which is around about 40 million miles. It's 4/10 of the distance to the Sun. Gravitational fields and infrared work on what's called an inverse square relationship. So every unit of distance, the force magnifies by the square of it. When it was 2 away, we had a magnitude 9 earthquake. On September 26, the forces are 25 times greater. The gravitational forces, the infrared forces, they're all 25 times greater on that date. You see that list there of all the earthquakes? Every single one of those places, there will be earthquakes. And the magnitude of those earthquakes, does everybody know how the Richter scale works? Richter scale, for those of you who don't know, is that an 8.8 magnitude earthquake and an 8.9, the 8.9 is 10 times greater than the 8.8. Okay? And a 9 earthquake is 10 times greater than the 8.9, which means that to go from 8.8 to 9 is 100 times bigger. Okay? It's a logarithmic function. What I'm being told is on September 26th, the whole Pacific Rim will go with magnitude 12 to 15 earthquakes. Magnitude 12 to 15 earthquakes. Okay? That is totally consistent with the mathematics. I said there was going to be stuff that, you know, you might go, what? The whole Pacific Rim. New Zealand will disappear. Japan will disappear. Indonesia will disappear. China will disappear. Korea will disappear. Russia will disappear. The west coast of America will disappear. The whole lot.
What about Australia?
Whole lot.
What about Australia?
East coast of Australia will not be affected by the earthquakes per se, but they will be affected by the tidal waves that come from it. Okay, I want to talk a little bit before that. Okay? Before that happens, as you get into August and this gets closer, the gravitational effects of this brown dwarf star are going to start to pull not only on the crust of the planet greater, but they're going to pull on our little old moon. Now at the moment, the moon's got a fairly spherical orbit around the Earth, okay? But as this brown dwarf gets closer, it's going to pull the moon closer to it, and the moon is going to have a more elliptical orbit. So what's going to happen is the moon is going to be pulled into more elliptical orbit. What effect will that have on the planet? The effect it will have is that whenever the moon is here, its gravitational pull on the water will be greater, so you are going to have massive king tides. So expect through August and the beginning of September that the major coastal cities of the world will all be flooded at some point. Not tidal waves, but massive tides. London, Amsterdam, Melbourne, Sydney, Venice. If there's a coastal city it's whole Netherlands.
And what about places like Hawaii and Thailand in terms of high resurgence?
Everyone's going to be affected by it. Everyone's going to be affected by this. If you're living on the coast, and we've said to people, you're going to get a warning, sell your property and get out of there.
Can I ask you something?
Yep.
They also, a few years,
Shh, folks, please, I can't hear.
a few months back on TV, remember how we had that minor eclipse? I think it was last year.
That was a lunar eclipse. Yeah.
Now they're saying that we're going to have a major eclipse in November, but I don't know if it's this year or next year. I think they said next year.
Okay. Before we even get to that,
Okay.
September 26th, okay, for about a week before that, this object is going to be very, very obvious in our skies. One of the link, oh, no, I don't think I put it on that sheet. There is a link of somebody who went into SOHO, which is the, looks at the sun, and it's beautiful. It's March 15th or something like that. And there's an image of the sun, and there's an image of Venus, and there's this big black object there. Black, not throwing any light off, it's black. He went back a day later to confirm it all, and NASA had airbrushed it out. Airbrushed it out because it was inside the orbit of Venus, which is where it is at the moment. So this object is going to cover 1/5 of the sky. Okay, 1/5 of the sky, and it's going to be moving along. By then, anarchy will be ruling because they'll have collapsed the financial markets and they'll have put most people into concentration camps. Does everyone know about the FEMA camps? Okay, the FEMA camps, there's about 800 of them around the US, and they house 50,000 people upwards. And they are detention centres with barbed wire and the whole thing around them. 800 of them that can house 50,000 people each adds up to 40 million people. They're all fully manned, and yet the American prison system is overcrowded. Why can't they put some of their lower people into these detention centres? And the interesting thing about these FEMA camps is they have stockpiled coffins that can hold 3 bodies at a time. Why does the American government know that they're going to have to put 40 million people into detention centres for? Okay? And they're going to dispose of the bodies? Does this sound like something that happened? And who are the same people that are running all of this? It was a trial. They trialled everything out in the 40s.
So is that where religion is going to come in? Oh, this is like...
Religion's going to come in?
Is that where religion is going to come into all of this as well?
No.
No?
No.
So what's the purpose? For what reason?
Good, we'll get to all of that. Why are they doing that?
Yes.
Okay, why are the Illuminati doing it is a good question. Because they want to control everything, because they only need a certain number of people alive to be able to serve them. They have an agenda, which we'll get to in the second half. Okay, I want to get through this first half stuff so you know what's going on. When this object goes across the sky, it's going to cause an eclipse that will last at least 3 days. At least 3 days. But here's the big thing. When it lines up with the sun and our planet, there is going to be a cosmic sonic shockwave that will totally blow out our Van Allen belts and our magnetic fields, and will leave the planet totally open to gamma radiation. It's what they call in the Bible Gabriel's trumpet. When Gabriel's horn shall blow, the world shall da-da-da. It's a sonic blast to do with the lining up. The magnetic fields will be... They're already being weakened. It's like watching Star Trek. When the shields go down, bang. If you are out in the open at that point, you will literally be fried alive. It's like the vampire jumping out into the light. That's what's going to happen. So you need to be able to get out of direct light. for the whole duration that our magnetic field is down, which could be up to 2-3 weeks. Okay, so that's the first big thing. So you've got massive earthquakes happening. Basically every volcano on the planet will go off at that time. Are you all aware of the super volcano in Yosemite National Park? No, those of you who aren't. There is a volcano in the northern part of America under Yosemite National Park. The caldera is 200 miles long and 80 miles wide. Last year I got an email that said in 3 days there had been 1,100 earthquakes in that spot. But it was nothing to worry about. The lake bed has risen. The lake is so hot now that no fish can survive in it. And there was 1,100 earthquakes just in one 3-day period, but it's nothing to worry about. Am I going to believe them? When you go to the site that shows all the earthquakes around the world, and they are airbrushing off and taking off earthquakes that are happening in certain locations because they don't want you to know that they're going on, because the US government has written off 60 million of its people who live in the top northwest. Because if it told them the truth, it would have to relocate them. And they're all expendable. So it's prepared to let them die. So you're going to have all these volcanoes going off. So you're going to have pyroclastic blasts going everywhere. So you've got level 12, 13 magnitude earthquakes, volcanoes at the same point. You know, it's not going to shift a little bit like this. We're talking about the distance here and there dropping like 400 metres down, not little bucklings. Okay? Have you ever seen like images of the French Alps that show the rock strata like that, side on? That happens in the space of a couple of minutes because the power of the earthquake causes the rock to liquefy and form waves. And then they break, and then when it stops, they reconfigure like that. They tell you that all of these mountain ranges have all been formed over thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. Lie. They happen in the space of minutes. Machu Picchu was a seaside village because Lake Titicaca is a salt lake and it's 1,500 metres in the air. It happened overnight when the pole shift happens. These are the extremes that these things happen at. So we've got the cosmic waves that are going to hit. You're going to have wind speeds over 1,000 miles an hour. You're going to have surface temperatures of 60 degrees plus. There will be wildfires all over the planet. Airspeed, cosmic radiation, all the water surfaces are going to dry up. The volcanic ash is going to cause huge amounts of acid rain. So the electromagnetic pulses are going to fry all electrics. Have you noticed how the satellites and TVs are starting to play up? Yeah? They're all going to go down. And they're trying to patch it and cover it up so you don't notice it. But as this thing gets closer, more and more of the satellites are going to go down. Okay? So that's September 26. Moving on from September 26, the next date you have to be concerned about is October the 17th. October the 17th, Nibiru is now 0.23. It's the closest point that it comes to us. That's 21 million miles away from the Earth. So at 21 mils, if there are any volcanoes that have not gone off by then, if there's any part of the planet that is not separated by then, it will do it then. Because the forces involved are now over 80 times what they were when the Japan earthquake happened. Next date on from that is November the 2nd, 3rd through to the 7th. And what happened then was, when this thing's coming through and it passed through the asteroid belt, it picked up a few travellers with it, like the tin cans behind a wedding car. So here you've got this massive gravitational object goes through the asteroid belt and it drags a whole lot of stuff with it. Some of them are this big, some of them are 100 miles large. Now, the scientists will tell you that we've had all these extinction level events that stopped the Cambrian and the Mesozoic, 65 million years ago, that wiped out the dinosaurs, and they say there is something that causes an extinction level event every 26 million years. Well, sometimes when Nibiru comes through, we're not here at this close point, we're on the other side of the sun, so we're safe. But sometimes, maybe every 26 million years, we pass through the tail of this. And on November the 3rd to the 7th, we pass through the tail of this brown dwarf. So we are running a whole asteroid field. We're going to get huge numbers of showers. I've had this vision since I was a child, and now I know what it's about. It's a recurring thing that's coming to me year after year after year after year. Now I know what it's about. We have one saving grace at that time. Our moon is on the lee side. It can potentially shield us from some of the impacts. But I'm being told there will be major cities who will be obliterated by being hit by asteroids. And it's not one or two. There's going to be showers, massive showers of them, for about 3 days. And if you look at the other side of the moon, it is totally pockmarked with impact craters, different to the side that we see. So clearly it's done some sort of protection in the past. I'm feeling that the most likely time when the crust will totally separate and turn upside down will be October 17, because that's when the gravitational forces... It could go before then. Then November 23rd, there's another alignment which could cause more earthquakes, etc. But from then on, it starts to move further and further out. That's what's going to happen. That's when it's going to happen. And the wheres are pretty much everywhere will be affected. There are safe places to be, and we'll get into that in the second half, not just physically, but also spiritually. Okay, we're just giving you the physical stuff now, and then in the second half, Crystal will take you through a lot of the spiritual understandings, which will get you to understand why you've chosen to be here at this time when this is happening. And we'll cover a little bit of that in the second half. The last thing I want to leave you with before we have a break is this 2012. So what does 2012 mean? Okay. Where does the date December 21st, 2012 come from? December 21st, 2012. Mayan calendar? No. No. That date comes from the Illuminati. The date does not exist in the Mayan calendar. The Mayans do not talk about, they don't have our calendar date. So what people have supposedly done is they've tried to match the Mayan calendar to ours. But the Mayans don't talk about their calendar ending on a particular date as being significant. Like we don't go, oh, December 31st is the end of some massive thing. They talk about a change. They talk about a shift from the fifth sun, from the end of the fourth sun into the fifth sun. They don't mention anything about a brown dwarf. The Mayans talk about a shift of the sun. That's really important, the fourth sun, and we'll get into that. The date is being given by the Illuminati to trap the New Age people. To trap them into believing they have to prepare for this date, so they're caught totally unawares by what's going to happen in the next 2 months. And most New Age people have bought it hook, line and sinker, because it's all tied into the Mayan calendar, and therefore it's about the ascension. And there's going to be no big earth changes because we can pray them away and we can do all of that, which we'll get into the second half. The Mayans talk about earth changes that precede it, but not at the same time. So what's happened is everybody has dumped everything onto this Illuminati constructed date. Everything to do with the birth of Jesus and all these things, they're all things that are tied into Illuminati ritual. That just happens to be the winter solstice. What a coincidence, because the Illuminati are all into that sort of stuff. Dates and all sorts of things. That comes from them. It's not a real date. But coincidentally, around that time is the beginning of a transition period. Okay? What else was I going to say about that? So yeah, Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, all of those prophecies that relate to what's going to happen in the next 2 months have all been dumped onto this date because people are stupid and they'll buy it. And if you tell them enough times, it comes from the Mayan calendar, it comes from the Mayan calendar, they'll believe it. It's not in the Mayan calendar at all. Nowhere. And here's another interesting thing. The Mayans were smart. They had the number 0. If I go from 3 BC to 2 BC to 1 BC, what year's next?
0.
The next year is 1 AD. There is no year 0 in our calendar. So straight away, we've lost a year off there. And at the time, there were 3 different calendars running at the turn of the millennium. 3 different calendars. And it's got pulled here, there and everywhere. Okay, it wasn't till Pope Gregory in 540 AD or something like that that we got the calendar that we have now, which interestingly enough was based on an old Mayan calendar, an old Egyptian calendar and all those things. So they've borrowed. Every religion has been created by the Illuminati and megalomaniacs borrowing stuff from here, there and everywhere. There's not an ounce of truth in any of it. If you're interested, I could tell you who Moses really was and who Jesus really was and how they've been corrupted and how they've been twisted to enslave the masses.
What about Orthodox, Serbian and Russian?
All of them are derivatives of the original lies that you've been told. And all of those lies have been there to enslave you and trap you, to stop you from free thinking that you have a total connection to Source every single microsecond. And there are no rules. Source does not have rules. There is no good and evil. There is no right or wrong. It's just an experience. And if Source doesn't have those rules and says to you, whatever you do enriches my being, then why do we suddenly feel that we have to listen to someone who tells us that we can only access that spiritual knowledge through them? And we have to do what they tell us to do, or we're heretics and be burned at the stake or excommunicated or something like that.
So is karma part of the lie?
Karma is non-existent unless you choose to believe it. There is only cause and effect. I let go of the pen, it falls down. There is no good or bad. But if you believe in karma, that's what you will manifest, because you have total free will to create whatever you want.
So what about like past lives and people saying, oh, well, I did this in my past life, so now I've got this in this life?
Okay. Past lives implies that time is linear, and it's not. Time is simultaneous. You can have alternate lives and you can experience things. Let's say that you're an actor and you've chosen to play a role in a particular play. And having done that season, you then sit back afterwards and go, oh, I could have done that bit better. Yeah, oh yeah, I should have done that there. That would have been better. That's what you do. You find better ways to play the roles. And things that are more connected with him in love. And we can talk more about that later. So 2012. What's 2012 about? I'll give you what that's about and then we'll have a break. Okay. Our solar system is part of the Milky Way galaxy. And you've probably all seen pictures of the Milky Way galaxy. It's like a spiral galaxy that's looking at it from the top. And looking at it from side on, sort of looks a little bit like a UFO sort of thing. At the middle of our galaxy, as with all galaxies, is a black hole, massive black hole. And black holes give out energy in two directions. They give it out in pulses that radiate outwards, like when you drop a pebble in a pond and they radiate out. So that's like on a plane. and they send it out in a spike from the centre. Okay, so here's our plane going through here, which is a big disc, and the pulses radiate out from there. Now our solar system's out here somewhere on one of these arms. We're not even a major player in the galaxy. Seriously, the human form is not. But everything revolves around something. So not only do we revolve around the galaxy, but we revolve around another solar system, i.e. Sirius. Ever wondered why we're so connected to Sirius? It's because we're in a paired orbit around a black hole in Alcyon. So we're going up and down as we go around, like that, like a carousel horse going up and down. Is anyone familiar with the Vedic yugas, where they divide civilization up to periods of ascent and descent that covers like 520,000 years or something like that? As we go up here, we're getting further away from the galactic plane, which is a gravity, and we slow down. And then we get pulled back and we accelerate. We are in a position of acceleration at the moment, and we're just about to go into this galactic plane, which is also known as the photon band. Okay? So what happens when we hit the photon band? Because people talk about spiritual ascension. Okay. It is impossible for you to spiritually ascend. Do you know why? Because you're already there. Remember how I said everything comes from source downwards? Your higher self has chosen to manifest into this dimension to experience. You've chosen to manifest. You may have forgotten it because you're caught up in the third dimensional stuff, but you cannot ascend to something that you already are. You just become aware of where you're perceiving it from. Are you so caught up in the play that you believe you're the character, or are you sitting in the audience admiring your work? You can't ascend because you already are every single vibrational aspect. So what is this so-called ascension about? I'm going to go back to nuclear physics, and I'm going to go to an atom, and the simplest atom of hydrogen, because we have a lot of hydrogen in us. We're basically hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. That's what most of us are. So we have a proton here, and we have an electron in what they call a shell. Does everyone sort of remember that from basic science or something like that? And then you get to helium, and helium has 2 and 2, and then you get the next one up and you get another shell and another shell. Even hydrogen, even though it's only got 1 proton here, this other energy shell still exists. Remember how we went back to the sun has these vibrational things that cause the planets to form in certain areas? As above, so below. The macro and the micro is exactly the same. When we go through the photon band, it's a huge pulse of energy. Ever put your foot down on the pedal of a piano and hit one note and all the others vibrate and it goes woo? When we go through the photon band, every single atom in your body gets hit by this energy, and the electrons jump to the next level, or maybe even to the level beyond that. So every single atom in your body becomes energized. And as you do that, you become less dense. Higher vibration, less dense, which people go, oh, it's fifth dimensional existence. That's the physics of it. It's not some spiritual thing that you have to work to do. You could do that anytime you choose by shifting your perception. But what's happening here on this planet is a very, very different thing. This is going to happen, but it's the agenda behind it. And the second half, we're going to get into the who and the why.